welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. Now, thousands of mourners gathered to pay their respect to Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi as he was buried in the holy city of Mashhad. Raisi, along with Iranian Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian and other officials, died in a helicopter crash on the borders of Iran and Azerbaijan.
Thousands of mourners packed the streets of Mashhad on Thursday for the funeral of Iran's late president Ebrahim Raisi. The ceremony in Raisi's hometown took place 4 days after he was killed in a helicopter crash, along with Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian and others. He was laid to rest at the gold-domed Imam Reza Shrine, the holiest Islamic site in Iran. Raisi's coffin was flown to Mashhad in northeast Iran, where it was welcomed by a guard of honor, after a procession was held for him on Thursday morning in the eastern city of Burjand. Thousands there paid their respects as his remains were driven through the streets in a motorcade. 8 passengers and crew died when Raisi's helicopter crashed in mountainous terrain near the Azerbaijan border. Iran proclaimed 5 days of mourning for Raisi, who enacted the hardline policies of his mentor, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, aimed at entrenching clerical power, cracking down on opponents, and adopting a tough line on foreign policy issues, such as nuclear talks with Washington to revive Iran's 2015 nuclear pact. 63-year-old Raisi was widely seen as a candidate to succeed 85-year-old Khamenei, who wields ultimate power in Iran. The country has installed an interim president until the upcoming election, scheduled for June 28th.
As Taiwan gets a new president, a tough message to cease intimidation against the island state has been sent across to China. Beijing too reiterated with military drills around the island of Taiwan. Take a look.
As the Democratic Progressive Party begins its 3rd consecutive term as the main ruling party of Taiwan, the newly sworn-in president of the island nation calls on China to stop intimidating his nation. In the inauguration speech, President Lai Ching-te stressed on maintaining peace and stability in the region.
I want to call on China to cease their political and military intimidation against Taiwan, share with Taiwan the global responsibility of maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait as well as the greater region, and ensure the world is free from the fear of war.
The new Taiwan president is expected to carry the legacy of the former president, Tsai Ing-wen. While the former president had been known to be a hyper-nationalist with extreme views on China, President Lai is trying to balance Taiwan's policy towards China, urging Beijing to choose dialogue over confrontation. However, that has not diminished his position on China being an aggressor, therefore putting both the leaders on the wrong side with mainland China.
Therefore, I hope that China will face the reality of the Republic of China's existence, respect the choices of the people of Taiwan, and in good faith choose dialogue over confrontation. Exchange over containment, and under the principles of parity and dignity, engage in cooperation with the legal government chosen by Taiwan's people.
DPP lost majority in the legislature, making it hard for Lai to push through legislation. The country's parliament voted on several controversial bills meant for reforming the legislative body. The alliance of the opposition parties, Nationalist Party and the Taiwan People's Party, have majority now. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken congratulated the Taiwanese president, condemning the US's congratulatory message. China reiterated Taiwan's reunification with the mainland.
Taiwan independence is a dead end. Condoning support for Taiwan independence is doomed to failure, and no external forces can stop the historical momentum of China's unification.
As the Taiwanese president relays his message across the mainland, the Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army started joint military drills surrounding the island of Taiwan. The drills, codenamed Joint Sword 2024A, were conducted in the Taiwan Strait, the north, south and east of Taiwan Island. The Taiwan Coast Guard also told a Chinese vessel close to its border to leave.
The joint exercises and training carried out by Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army in the vicinity of the island of Taiwan was to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity, to vigorously punish the separatist forces for seeking independence in Taiwan. Chinese warships are staying outside of Taiwan's 24-mile contiguous zone. It is the same for the aircraft outside the 24-mile contiguous. As of whether there is live fire drills, as far as we are aware, there was live fire drills inland, but it has not conducted live fire drills in the areas near Taiwan.
Meanwhile, a US delegation also met the new president and vowed to maintain cooperation in trade, security, and technology.
The United States is going to continue to deliver on our long-standing commitment to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability.
Lai, 64, took oath along with new Vice President Tsai Ing-wen, who had served as Taiwan's top envoy to the United States. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And to discuss what's happening in Taiwan and in the region, I'm being joined by Kelvin Chan, who's a journalist at Taiwan News and is joining us from Taipei. Thank you so much, Kelvin, for joining us here. Now, with Taiwan getting a new president, what are the expectations of the people, from the people? This comes at a time when we know that it's a divided parliament and DPP no longer has a majority. So the honeymoon period is over even before it begins. In such a scenario, how do you see the decisions really be taken, and how will it play out, not just for Taiwan, but also for the people?
Yeah, well, I think he's got to hit the ground running now. As you can see, he's facing two major challenges. One is confronting China and handling Chinese aggression around Taiwan. And the second is dealing with the opposition party, the Kuomintang, who is recently they're trying to push some controversial bills, and they're trying to kind of limit the president's power. They want to kind of force the president to deliver a speech to them every year, and also to produce certain documents at their request. So currently, those two issues are what the president is facing right now. And as for the people, I feel the people are cautiously optimistic. Lai has pledged to strengthen Taiwan's democracy, as well as strengthen Taiwan's national security. So the people, they understand the challenges, but they have confidence overall in what Lai can do for Taiwan.
Right, so are you really seeing a shift? Because we see the numbers have changed. So are you seeing a shift in some parts of Taiwan, particularly those parts that are close to mainland China, which is growing closer to Kuomintang rather than DPP?
I would not say there's any huge changes in the voting trends, but I'd say overall, the younger generation of Taiwanese are more often than not voting or supporting the DPP, the Democratic People's Progressive Party.
Now, we do know that President Lai has said that China should stop threatening the country. And in such a period where we see that there was a very nationalist, a hardline president and leadership in Tsai Ing-wen, President Lai actually has tried to balance things out. He's trying to wear those large boots, but also is trying to be a little sensible and choose a middle ground. How do you see that really pan out for Taiwan then?
I do. I think he could potentially do a good job. I mean, from what I see, he's going to be sort of a Tsai Ing-wen version 2.0. He's already pledged to sort of continue what Tsai has already been doing. In terms of defense, he's already promised to continue building up Taiwan's domestic weapons production, such as missiles and drones. And in terms of like Chinese gray zone tactics, he's gonna certainly have a challenge dealing with that, but he's going to be firm and assertive whenever he needs to be.
Right. Apart from just being assertive, he's also proposed dialogue to resolve the one nation, one China policy of Beijing. But we see that there is a very extreme hardline faction in the Xi Jinping government also, and led by the president himself. So do you really see a forward movement when it comes to a rapprochement between China and Taiwan?
At least for maybe in the next 10 years, I feel like it's just a deadlock in dialogue. China won't budge in its position. They're completely entrenched in their one principle, and their precondition is that Taiwan must accept itself as a part of China, whereas Lai Ching-te or Taiwan, uh, he will only initiate or engage in dialogue without any preconditions. So the two sides are engaged in a deadlock.
Well, he's also proposed the idea, President Lai, of maybe reopening exchanges between Taiwan and mainland China. Now, do you see that certainly as maybe a step that the president is taking towards China?
Yeah, it's definitely a very attainable objective to increase certain exchanges, maybe cultural or educational. But in terms of political dialogue, then I do think it's going to be extremely hard to increase those types of political dialogue tensions.
Well, the other aspect is during elections and even before that, we've seen massive airspace violations by China. Do you, in your appreciation, then think that will continue to increase? And should there be more engagement between this new administration and America? And furthermore, visits of senators and congressmen from the US to Taiwan. Are we to expect things heating up in the Taiwan Straits?
Well, first of all, when you say airspace, it's not really airspace. It's air defense identification zone, which is claimed by Taiwan, but it's not the actual airspace over Taiwan. That's my next point, is that I do think Chinese provocations or incursions into the ADIZ, for short, they will increase. And it's all part of China's gray zone tactics in order to wear down Taiwan's defense resources and manpower. And as for continued visits by foreign officials or delegations, they will continue. I don't think that these Chinese incursions into the ADIZ will really affect foreign officials from visiting Taiwan.
Interesting, but also the fact that Taiwan requires, Kelvin, a lot of support from the United States of America. But with all the conflicts that we are seeing in the region, whether it is the Israel-Hamas war or for that matter the Russia-Ukraine war, where a lot of money and weapons have been pledged, how do you then see America stand by Taiwan should there be a reason or a need when China sees a vacuum and would want to enter the Taiwanese territory?
I would not say that there's any sort of vacuum in terms of U.S. support for Taiwan. Of course, the U.S. has a lot of focus on the Middle East and Ukraine, but the U.S. ties and relationship with Taiwan are extremely solid, and one should never doubt their support for Taiwan and Taiwan's defense needs.
And before I let you go, Kelvin, about the economy, Taiwan is very important when it comes to semiconductor chip industry. But in this volatile environment, how do you see the current and the new administration ensure that Taiwan's economy continues to grow? And secondly, what is the contribution that you see of India, given that now we have a mobility agreement between India and Taiwan? There's skilled workers or workforce that are going from India to Taiwan, whether it's the tech industry or not, but certainly skilled labor moving from India to Taiwan. So what's the contribution over here to Taiwanese economy?
Actually, under Tsai Ing-wen, the former president, she initiated many economic or trade negotiations, such as with the U.S. and Canada. And so those things will continue underlie, and the results and benefits from those those initiatives and economic deals will come into fruition underlie. In terms of India's contributions to Taiwan's economy, I feel like the potential is extremely large. Of course, India and Taiwan recently signed a labor deal, and that will definitely have a huge benefit for Taiwan's labor force. But in other areas, such as maybe space and also semiconductor cooperation, I think there's certainly a lot of areas where Taiwan and India could cooperate in.
Kelvin Chen, thank you so much for joining us here and giving us a detailed analysis on what's happening in Taiwan and what this new administration really means for Taiwan, the region, and for Taiwan-India ties. French President Macron visited New Caledonia and urged for peace and calm to return. He took stock of the situation and met local leaders when the situation has been quite strife-torn because of the Paris bill to have rights for the French to vote in Caledonia. Here's a report.
French President Emmanuel Macron visited the Pacific island of New Caledonia. As soon as he landed, the president urged for calm and peace to return.
My wish, along with the ministers and the entire government, is to stand with the people so that we can return to peace, to calm and safety as quickly as possible. This is the top priority.
President Macron met local elected officials and business leaders. He stressed on the need for dialogue to reach a resolution. But he said police reinforcements in New Caledonia would remain as long as peace does not return.
It is truly in a spirit of construction, of dialogue and of appeasement that I stand before you, but also with the responsibility that is mine, and therefore that of trying to build this path within the framework that we know that the people have chosen. In the coming hours and days, massive new operations will be scheduled where necessary, and Republican order in its entirety will be re-established because there is no other choice.
But locals feel the solution to this crisis is not political.
I don't think anything particular about it, in the sense that for me, I'm convinced that the solution is not political at all. Because whether we decide one thing or the other, half of the population will be frustrated. This is not something that we can accept. Perhaps for an election, but not for a future. So I'm convinced that the solution lies with the population.
6 people so far have been killed in riots, with shops looted and cars torched. The riots started after lawmakers in mainland France made changes to the constitution of New Caledonia, empowering French residents to participate in the provincial electoral process, which the indigenous Kanaks fear will dilute their votes. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
The International Criminal Court Prosecutor's Office had requested arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his defense chief, and 3 Hamas leaders for alleged war crimes. Prosecutor Karim Khan's office said it suspected all 5 bore criminal responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Israel or the Gaza Strip. Here is a report.
The International Criminal Court in The Hague.
The International Criminal Court's prosecutor has requested arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his defense chief Yoav Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders over alleged war crimes. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan said in a statement on Monday that he had reasonable grounds to believe that all bear criminal responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Hamas leaders' arrest warrants were for the group's chief, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed al-Masri, the commander-in-chief of its military wing, and Ismail Haniyeh, head of its political bureau.
Those who do not comply with the law should not complain later when my office takes action based upon solid evidence. That day has come. Today we underline in the clearest possible fashion that international law and the laws of armed conflict apply to everyone. No foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader, no one can act with impunity.
Israeli War Cabinet's Minister Benny Gantz said accepting the ICC prosecutor's decision, quote, would harm the ability of any country to defend its citizens and will constitute a crime of historic proportion.
האבסורדי והשקרי של התובע בהאג לא מכוון רק נגד ראש ממשלת ישראל ונגד שר הביטחון.
The absurd and deceitful warrant of the prosecutor in The Hague is aimed not only against Israel's Prime Minister and Defense Minister, it is aimed against the entire state of Israel. As the Prime Minister of Israel, I reject with disgust the comparison of prosecutor in Hague between democratic Israel and mass murders of Hamas. This is a complete distortion of reality.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. And it's clear Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. But let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that. We will always stand with Israel and the threats against its security.
Gallant and Netanyahu have overseen Israel's offensive against Hamas in Gaza since the Palestinian militant group's deadly October 7th raid on Israel. Some 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 taken hostage in the rampage, according to Israeli tallies. Since then, at least 35,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war in Gaza, according to the enclave's health ministry. And aid agencies have also warned of widespread hunger, a risk of famine, and dire shortages of fuel and medical supplies. Israeli and Palestinian leaders have both previously dismissed allegations of committing war crimes. Khan said evidence collected by his office showed Israel has systematically deprived civilians of objects indispensable to human survival, including restricting food, water, medicine, and energy. Netanyahu and Gallant bore responsibility, he said, for Israel willfully causing great suffering and for killing as a war crime. The Hamas leaders face allegations of bearing responsibility for crimes committed by the militant group, including extermination and murder, the taking of hostages, torture, rape, and other acts of sexual violence. It will now be up to a panel of pre-trial judges to determine whether the evidence from the ICC prosecutor's office supports the issuing of arrest warrants. The ICC's 124 member states are obliged to immediately arrest the wanted person if they are on a member state's territory. However, it has no means to enforce arrest warrants, and its investigation into the Gaza war has been opposed by the United States and Israel, neither of whom are members of the ICC.
Early elections have been called in the UK. Now, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, leader of Britain's opposition party, the Labour Party, both kicked off their election campaign. During his campaign, Sunak said to workers in a distribution centre that he expected to see flights taking asylum seekers to Rwanda by July. Sunak, whose Conservative Party has trailed Labour by around 20 percentage points in opinion polls since he became Prime Minister in October 2022, shocked and angered many in his party when he gambled on a July 4th elections, calling it months earlier than expected. On the other hand, Starmer has vowed to bring stability and change. If the Labour Party wins, Starmer would become Britain's 6th Prime Minister in 8 years, the first time that has happened since the 1830s. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney too said his party was preparing to hit the road to kick off their election campaign a day after UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced a surprise vote for July. That's all in this edition of World Today. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates. Goodbye and take care.